There is a patch of grass in your yard right now that is dying of thirst while sitting directly underneath a sprinkler. I know how that sounds. You've watered it. You've watered it more than the rest of the lawn because it's the part that keeps looking bad. You've stood there with the hose for 10 solid minutes, watched the water disappear into the ground, and walked away feeling like you finally gave it what it needed. And 3 days later, that patch is still crispy, still faded, still that ugly blue-grey colour, while the grass 18 inches away is thick and green and perfectly happy. Here's the part nobody tells you. Dig into that patch with a trowel, go down about 2 inches and pull out a handful of soil. In most cases, it will be bone dry, powder dry, dry enough to blow away if you breathe on it. After 10 minutes of watering, that soil isn't thirsty. That soil is waterproof, and it's not rare. Turf scientists have been studying this for over 60 years. Golf course superintendents fight it every single summer, and it has a name most homeowners have never heard: soil water repellency, or in plain English, hydrophobic soil. The fix costs about $2, and there's a very good chance it's sitting under your kitchen sink right now. But, and this matters, if you use it the wrong way, at the wrong strength, on the wrong day, you can burn that patch far worse than the drought ever would have. So stay with me, because the how is more important than the what. Let's start with why this happens in the first place, because once you see it, you'll never look at a dry spot the same way again. Soil was never a sponge. Most of us carry around a mental picture of soil as a sponge. Pour water on top, sponge soaks it up, roots drink from the sponge. Simple. That picture is wrong in a way that matters enormously here. Soil doesn't absorb water the way a sponge does. Soil moves water through capillary action, the same force that makes water climb up the sides of a straw, or wick up a paper towel dipped in a puddle. Water molecules are extremely attracted to each other, which is why they form beads. But they're also attracted to certain surfaces, and when that surface attraction is stronger than the water's attraction to itself, the water spreads out, grabs the surface, and gets pulled into every tiny gap between soil particles. That's the whole mechanism. Capillary action is a tug-of-war between water sticking to itself and water sticking to soil. Now here's what most people don't realize. That tug-of-war only works if the surface of the soil particle is something water actually wants to stick to. Clean sand, clean clay, clean silt. Water loves those surfaces. It grabs on and gets sucked down into the root zone. But if you coat those particles in something waxy, the whole system inverts. Water no longer wants to touch the surface. It would rather stick to itself. So it beads up, sits on top, rolls sideways, and finds somewhere else to go. Your soil hasn't lost its ability to hold water. It's lost its ability to accept water. And the thing doing the coating is something you've been feeding for years without knowing it. The wax you've been growing every autumn, every mowing, every time a root dies back and a leaf blade breaks down, organic material gets deposited into your soil. Fungi and bacteria go to work on it. They chew through the easy stuff first: sugars, starches, simple proteins, because that's the fast energy. What they leave behind is the hard stuff: lignins, resins, cutins, long-chain fatty acids and waxes. These are the same compounds that make a leaf shiny, that make pine needles shed rain, that keep a plant from drying out in the sun. They are, by design, water repellent. That's their entire biological job. As soil dries, those waxy compounds don't just sit there loose. They melt slightly, migrate, and coat the surface of individual soil particles like a microscopic layer of candle wax. Then they harden. Fungi make it worse in a very specific way. Many soil fungi produce proteins called hydrophobins, which coat their thread-like mycelium so that it can push through wet soil without drowning. It's a brilliant adaptation, and it means that anywhere you have a dense mat of fungal threads, you have a dense mat of water-repellent coating, baked right into your root zone. That's why fairy rings and hydrophobic dry spots so often show up together. The dark green ring, the mushrooms after rain, the arc of dead-looking turf just inside it, that's fungal mycelium so thick it has physically sealed the soil against water. This is also why sandy soils get hit hardest. Sand particles are big and round, which means a given volume of sandy soil has far less total surface area than the same volume of clay. Less surface area means it takes far less wax to coat all of it. A sandy lawn can go fully water repellent from an amount of organic residue that a clay soil would shrug off completely. It's the reason sand-based golf greens, some of the most intensively managed turf on the planet, suffer from something superintendents call localized dry spot almost every single season. But that's only half of the mechanism, because the wax is always there to some degree, and yet your lawn doesn't repel water in April. Something has to switch it on. The switch. Here's where things get genuinely interesting. Soil water repellency has a trigger point, and that trigger is dryness itself. While soil holds a decent amount of moisture, those waxy molecules stay loosely arranged, with their water-friendly ends pointing outward into the moisture. The soil behaves normally, water goes in, roots drink, everyone's fine. But when soil dries past a certain moisture threshold, researchers call it the critical soil water content, those molecules physically reorient. They flip so their greasy, water-hating ends face outward, and then they lock into that arrangement as the last of the moisture leaves. The coating goes from passive to actively repellent, and once it flips, it does not flip back easily. Adding a little water doesn't undo it. The soil now has to be held in contact with water for an extended period, sometimes many hours, before the arrangement relaxes and normal wetting resumes. Sit with that for a second because it explains almost everything strange you've seen in your lawn. It explains why the problem always appears after the first real heat wave, not during a cool spring. It explains why the same patches come back in the same place year after year. It explains why an afternoon thunderstorm can drop half an inch of rain, and that one spot still looks dead the next morning while everything around it perked up. And it explains why the more that spot dries out, the harder it becomes to fix, because dryness is both the symptom and the cause. Which brings us to the most counterintuitive part of this whole thing. Why more water makes it worse. When water hits repellent soil, it doesn't stop. It has to go somewhere. So it runs off sideways to the low spots. It runs down the sides of the sprinkler head. And critically, it finds any crack, any old root channel, any earthworm burrow, any spot where the coating is thinner, and it dives down through that channel at speed. Soil physicists call this preferential flow, or fingered flow, and if you could see it in cross-section, it looks exactly like it sounds. Narrow fingers of water plunging straight down through the soil profile, past the root zone, into the subsoil, while the soil an inch to either side of each finger stays completely, perfectly dry. So you run the sprinkler for 20 minutes. You see the water go in. It genuinely does go in, but it went past your grass roots, not to them. Meanwhile, 3 other things are quietly going wrong. The first is that the runoff and the deep drainage carry your fertilizer with them. You're paying for nitrogen that ends up below the root zone or in the storm drain. The second is that all that frequent shallow watering trains your grass to build a shallow, lazy root system. Roots grow toward moisture. If the only reliable moisture is in the top inch, that's where the roots live, which makes the plant even more vulnerable the next time the surface dries out. The third is the ugliest. Keeping the surface constantly damp while the layer below stays bone dry is close to ideal conditions for the fungal activity that produces more hydrophobic coating in the first place. You are, without meaning to, feeding the exact process that's causing the problem. More water is not the answer. More water is the accelerator. Before we fix it, let's make absolutely sure this is what you're dealing with, because dry spot gets misdiagnosed as grub damage, disease, dog urine, and heat stress constantly. 3 tests you can do this afternoon. The first one is the test the researchers actually use, and it takes about 30 seconds. Find the bad. Patch. Push the grass aside so you can see bare soil, or scrape away the very top layer of debris. Then let a single drop of water fall onto the exposed soil and count how long it takes to disappear. Healthy, wettable soil swallows that drop in under 5 seconds. If it takes more than 60 seconds, you have significant repellency. If the drop just sits there, holding its shape like a bead of mercury for 2 or 3 minutes, and you can watch this happen, it's oddly hypnotic. You have severe repellency. That bead is water refusing to touch a waxy surface, and it is the entire problem visible to the naked eye. The second test is the profile check. Take a trowel or a soil probe and pull a plug out of the bad area, 4 inches deep, and pull another one from a healthy area nearby. Break both in half and feel them. In a hydrophobic patch, you'll very often find a slightly damp top half inch sitting directly on top of powder-dry soil, with an almost shocking line between them. In the healthy plug, moisture will be spread evenly all the way down. That contrast is your confirmation. The third test is for anyone with pots or containers, and honestly, this is where most people meet hydrophobic soil for the first time, without recognizing it. If you water a potted plant and water comes rushing out the drainage holes within about 5 seconds, the soil didn't absorb anything. It ran down the gap between the shrunken root ball and the pot wall. Check the pot's weight before and after. If it barely got heavier, nothing went in. Peat-based potting mixes are notorious for this once they've dried fully, and it's why plants die of drought in a pot you swear you've been watering. Then there are the visual tells. Hydrophobic patches usually have irregular, blotchy shapes with surprisingly crisp edges. They show footprints, When you walk across and the grass doesn't spring back, that's water stress. The blades take on a dull blue-grey cast before they go brown. And the giveaway, after a decent rain, everything greens up except that spot. If 2 or more of those match your lawn, you've found it. Now let's talk about the $2 fix and the science that makes it work. The molecule that breaks the seal. To beat a water-repellent surface, you can't force the water in. You have to change the water. Water beads because of surface tension, that inward pull of water molecules gripping each other. It's the same force that lets a water strider walk across a pond and makes rain roll off a freshly waxed car hood. Water has unusually high surface tension for a liquid, and against a greasy surface, it just wants to ball up and be left alone. A surfactant, short for surface active agent, is a molecule built specifically to break that up, and its design is almost too neat to be real. Picture a tadpole. One end, the head, is strongly attracted to water. The other end, the tail, is strongly attracted to oils, fats, and waxes. One molecule, 2 personalities, permanently at war with itself. Drop a lot of these into water and something remarkable happens. They rush to every boundary they can find. At the water's surface, they wedge between water molecules and physically stop them from gripping each other so tightly. Surface tension collapses, and when that water reaches a wax-coated soil particle, the tails bury themselves into the wax while the heads stay sticking out into the water. The soil particle now has a water-friendly face pointing outward. The contact angle collapses. Capillary action switches back on. Water stops beading and starts spreading, and it gets pulled into the pores exactly the way it's supposed to. That's the whole trick, and it's the identical reason dish soap cleans a greasy pan. You're not dissolving the wax. You're building millions of microscopic bridges across it, which is why the cheapest bottle of plain liquid dish soap on the shelf can rescue a dry spot that a week of watering couldn't touch. How to actually use it without wrecking your lawn. This part is where people go wrong, so let's be precise. Use plain, basic liquid dish soap, the cheap stuff. What you want to avoid is anything labeled antibacterial, anything with bleach or oxygen bleach, heavy-duty degreasers, and absolutely anything that says laundry detergent. Laundry products are loaded with salt-based builders and brighteners that will scorch turf. The rate is roughly 1 fluid ounce, which is 2 tablespoons per gallon of water. Over. A lawn that works out to somewhere around 3 ounces spread across 1,000 square feet. In a watering can, mix it in gently so you're not making a bucket of foam, and pour it over the affected patch until the surface is thoroughly wet. Then, and this step is not optional, immediately follow with clean water, 1/4 to 1/2 inch of it. You want the soap solution carried down into the profile and off the grass blades, not left sitting on the leaves. Timing matters as much as dosing. Do this in the early morning or the evening. Never in full afternoon sun on a hot day, because surfactants work on plant waxes too, and the cuticle on a grass blade is exactly the kind of waxy layer they love to disrupt. Combine that with midday heat and you get leaf burn. Before you apply anything, take a garden fork and punch holes through the patch, 4 to 6 inches deep, every few inches. You're physically breaking the seal so the solution has channels to travel through, instead of sheeting off the surface. This single step probably doubles your success rate. Then use the cycle and soak method. 15 minutes of water, 30 minutes off, 15 more minutes on. That pause is doing real work. It gives the surfactant time to sit against those waxy coatings and flip them instead of blasting past them. Repeat once a week for 3 or 4 weeks on a bad spot, and then stop. I want to be honest about why you stop because most videos won't tell you this. Dish soap is a blunt instrument. It was designed to strip grease off ceramic, not to be gentle with living tissue. Used repeatedly over months, it can strip the protective cuticle from grass blades, and the residue can build up in soil in ways that aren't great for soil biology. It's a rescue tool and a diagnostic tool. Brilliant for both, but it's not a maintenance program. If you have a lawn that goes hydrophobic every single summer, the long-term answer is a proper turf wetting agent. Those use gentler surfactant chemistries, often alkyl polyglucosides or block copolymers, engineered to stay active in the root zone for weeks and to be safe on plant tissue. They cost more than $2. They're worth it if you're fighting this annually. For potted plants, scale it right down, a few drops per gallon, then set the pot in a tub of that water and let it soak from the bottom for 30 minutes. Bottom soaking beats top watering every time on a dried out root ball because it gives capillary action a long, uninterrupted window to do its job. The watering change that prevents the whole thing. Here's the part that actually keeps it from coming back. Roots chase water. That's it, that's the rule. Water lightly every day and you build a root system that lives in the top inch of soil, entirely at the mercy of the next hot afternoon. Water deeply and infrequently and roots follow that moisture down, 6, 8, 10 inches, into soil that stays cool and damp long after the surface has baked. Aim for 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week total, delivered in 1 or 2 long sessions rather than 5 short ones. And measure it, don't guess. Put an empty tuna can on the lawn while the sprinkler runs and time how long it takes to fill an inch. Almost everyone is shocked by that number the first time. It's usually far longer than they'd been running it. Water between about 4 and 9 in the morning. The wind is calm, evaporation is minimal, and the blades dry as the sun comes up, which cuts your disease pressure dramatically compared to evening watering. Now connect this back to the mechanism. Repellency switches on when soil dries past its critical moisture threshold. Frequent light watering means the top inch of soil is swinging wet, dry constantly, crossing that threshold over and over, week after week, which is exactly the cycle that builds and reactivates the wax coating. Deep, infrequent watering keeps the root zone above that threshold for far longer stretches. You're not just growing better roots, you're switching off the trigger. Beyond watering, 3 things make lasting change. Core aeration in spring or fall pulls physical plugs out and gives water permanent highways down through the profile. Top dressing with a 1/4 inch of good compost afterwards adds humic substances, which are natural wetting agents in their own right, plus the microbial life that actively digests those waxy compounds. And if your thatch layer is thicker than half, an inch dethatch it, because thatch is a hydrophobic sponge sitting between your sprinkler and your soil. Do those 3 things, and the same patch that failed for 6 summers running can stop being a problem entirely. The real lesson. The lesson here is bigger than one dry spot. When something in the garden isn't working, the instinct is almost always to give it more of what it already isn't using. More water, more fertilizer, more effort. But a plant that can't absorb water isn't helped by more water, any more than a locked door is opened by pushing harder. Sometimes the fix isn't more. Sometimes the fix is removing the thing that's in the way. And in this case, the thing in the way is a layer of wax so thin you'll never see it, doing all its damage completely out of sight. So the next time you find a patch that refuses to recover, no matter how much you water it, don't reach for the hose. Reach for a single drop of water, put it on the soil, and watch what happens. That little bead sitting there, refusing to sink in, will tell you more in 30 seconds than a whole season of guessing. Have you ever had one stubborn patch in your lawn that never seems to recover no matter how much you water it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear whether the drop test confirms it. And that's it for today's garden tips and tricks. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more gardening tips, lawn care guides, plant care advice, and backyard transformations. Tell me in the comments what gardening problem you'd like covered next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy gardening!